Getting pregnant is not as easy as your high school health teacher made it sound like it would be. It is so easy to get overwhelmed by all the information, tips, and tools out there, and then discouraged when it's not working month after month. If this is where you're at right now, this video was meant for you. If you're new here, my name is Whitney. I'm a board-certified dietitian and fertility coach, and I help busy women get pregnant ASAP without sucking all the fun out of their life along the way. In today's video, my beautiful client Kate is sharing her experience trying to get pregnant and the foundational work she did to prepare for IVF success. Let's get started. Kate has lovingly decided to share her story, and I'm so excited because hers is such a good one.
I'm Kate. I am a speech language pathologist. I work at a hospital, primarily in acute rehab, so mostly with individuals who have had brain injuries or strokes, things like that, helping them get their swallowing back, get their language back. With my husband and my 85-pound chocolate lab, just the three of us.
When did you and your husband decide you wanted to try to have kids?
About 5 years ago.
Walk me through maybe like the earlier years.
My husband and I have actually been together since I was 18. We were long distance for the first 7 years of our relationship. He was working, I was in school and then grad school, and moving to Rhode Island was actually the first time that we were physically in the same place. Got married in 2015. After a few years together, decided that we would just start trying. And then after about a year of trying, when we hadn't achieved a pregnancy, started to look a little bit more closely and pay a little bit more attention. I've actually been pretty fortunate to have pretty regular cycles.
When did you first reach out? Did you reach out to a doctor first, or what was that first step after that first year?
Yeah, the first step, we went to a local fertility clinic just to get some kind of initial testing, like, okay, is there something that we're missing? Because again, there were no red flags. So let's just get the testing, see what that looks like. Like many people's stories, right? Everything looked normal and good, and we had
so perfect on paper, isn't she?
So perfect on paper. Unexplained infertility, which, I'm sure is a shared experience with so many couples and individuals. That's almost even more frustrating. Not that you want there to be something wrong, but when there's still no answer, it's just like, well, I don't know. But that first follow-up visit we had was a little off-putting for both of us, actually. It was kind of like, okay, everything's okay. Do you guys want to try IUI or IVF right now? And we were both kind of like, whoa, like we're just trying to figure this out. And we weren't ready to jump to that invasive of interventions at that point. So the next year, I actually had a friend who she is someone who believes in natural family planning and nothing invasive. And so because of that, she had worked with a NAPRO doctor. I had had my thyroid tested multiple times, but he actually found, I ended up needing medication for my thyroid, things like that. Like, here, I'm going to recommend this supplement, but I'm not going to tell you like which one or how much or which one's good. Just go on Amazon and get it. So that kind of,
just start taking it.
Yeah, just start taking it. I did end up having surgery for endometriosis, which they did find, but low grade. I forget if they grade it 1, 2, 3, 4 or A, B, C, D. So I was like a 2 to 3, and they were able to get it all, and it wasn't anything like overly concerning, but did have that. And then continued to work with him for a little while longer, but unfortunately still wasn't achieving our goal at the end of the day. So then my husband and I were never, I should have said in the beginning, we were never against doing IVF or IUI. We just weren't ready at that point. And so after, a few years of trying a little less invasive, we're like, okay, we need to look a little closer, and decided that we were going to go that route, try IUI first, and then go to IVF. But I was hell-bent on the fact that if I was going to do that and we were going to go this route, that I wanted my body to be in the best condition and prepped and ready to go for that. And then that's how I found Fertility. The blessing and the curse of social media and trying to conceive for so long. I had obviously at that point followed quite a few different accounts and, related to fertility and those kind of things. And it was a completely random, one of the accounts that I followed had shared one of your videos or one of your posts or something, took a look a little closer and then started following you and then found out about the program. Obviously, if you're going to invest in the cost, right, I wanted to make sure that I was fully invested and this was a program that I was, interested in and those kind of things. And then just looking more detailed, that's when I kind of went from your Instagram to the website, right, to look a little bit more closer and get those more details. And then, yeah, I just talked to my husband about it, and it was kind of like, well, at this point for us, it was a no-brainer. It was an investment in me and us in our future.
When you signed up, had you already decided you were definitely going for IVF?
Wasn't 100% that we were going to do IVF, but we knew that we were going to need that we were going to pursue a more invasive kind of approach. There's so many things out there on social media and just the internet in general I had spent so many years trying to piece all these things together. You don't always know the information that you're getting. Is this just someone who is sharing their own experience, which is very beneficial, but may not necessarily be my experience. And so I think the thing that was most appealing to me was that like this program had everything together. It was all, okay, I don't have to look over here for the nutrition piece and over here for the supplement piece. And the fact that you were so accessible in that, because so many times you would find something and I'd be like, oh, this is great information, but now I have a follow-up question and who do I ask or who do I know where to go? And then you end up down the rabbit hole again and you find something else. And
so what was the program like for you? I know how it is for me running it, but it's very different experiencing it.
It was a breath of fresh air for me, a little sense of relief. Again, like having spent so many years trying to find all these things and then finally feeling like I had concrete answers and like this, this is what you should do if this. And again, having a place to go for that. I liked the community piece that there were other people to, going through the program at the same time to kind of talk to if you needed, if you felt comfortable sharing, obviously, but didn't have to. And then having you as a resource was just like invaluable, to be able to, send you a quick message and just say like, hey, which one of these supplements is better? And I liked how structured it was, but also flexible. The fact that you had it broken up by different topics, different weeks, felt like, okay, this is not like all at once. It's not overwhelming, but I could kind of take it on your own time, but still feel like you were getting through everything and getting through all of the information.
Yeah. And you were working full time and you still are, but you had a full-time position while you were in this program. What would you say, like timing wise, how much time did you devote to the program each week?
Yes, I do work full time. I work 4 10-hour days though. So I have every Wednesday off, which I would make sure that I dedicated a little bit of time each Wednesday. The chats and things were usually at night. So that was pretty manageable. And then, yeah, each Wednesday, I would make sure like that would be my day to watch that week's video and go through kind of the different like activities and things, and then use that week to kind of manage all of that. I would say overall for the week, just a few hours, but it didn't feel like an overwhelming amount of time, but it felt like enough that I was that I was learning and the information was sinking in, but it wasn't like taking over or overwhelming.
What were the big like diet and lifestyle changes that you made throughout that time?
It was more kind of fine tuning things for us. Diet and lifestyle. It was smaller things that I didn't realize were bigger things. Some small diet change. Okay, I need to eat a little bit more protein. I realize I'm not eating enough protein. The supplements were huge. I think one of the first things, again, I'd been taking a prenatal just like I'm supposed to for how many years. And I think our first one-on-one, you looked at my prenatal and you were like, yeah, it's terrible. It was just like, type it into Amazon, see which one of the first ones that pops up and order that. But now comparing the one that you recommended that I still take to this day, the one that I had before, I'm like, oh, again, it's like prenatal light.
Prenatal light.
Yeah.
Just a touch of prenatal.
Just a little bit. But I had been taking that for over 3 years. He was on me, make sure you're taking your prenatal every day, but never looked at the prenatal I was taking. No one ever had before, they don't have to. They just tell you take a prenatal, and not knowing that it wasn't very good.
I think they don't ask these questions not to ignore it, but that's not what they're trained in. They know about prenatals, they know about vitamins, but they are not experts in that area. And so to have those kinds of conversations, it's kind of like me, I would assume, I'm not a NAPRO doctor, obviously, but I would assume it's very similar to me having a conversation about like letrozole dosing or letrozole versus an off-brand, like a generic. I know about letrozole. I know what it can do, the mechanism of action, but I don't know anything past that. And so for me to have those conversations, I assume would be very similar. It'd be uncomfortable.
I had already started to make some adjustments, little things like taking my phone out of my room or changing some of the products that we were using in the house. It didn't feel like, oh my gosh, we have to change so many things in our life. And I think that that's something that you really emphasize too, is just, making small changes. Don't go and throw everything out, but the next time you buy hand soap, like, get a better version.
You said your cycle was pretty regular before, like feeling pretty good. Did you notice any physical changes to your cycle or energy levels throughout the process?
My energy was definitely better. I wouldn't say, again, major changes to my cycle, but again, I know that I'm on the luckier side. Energy was definitely better, and just feeling like my body was in a little bit more of a routine, a little bit more of a groove.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What happened next? We finished Fertile as Fuck, and Fertile as Fuck is an 8-week program. For those who are unfamiliar, who haven't heard of the program at all, it's my 8-week signature program. Throughout that time, we built on my 5 pillars of fertility. We had an amazing one-to-one. What happened when that concluded?
End of January, beginning of February 2023, last year, was when we started the process at the fertility clinic with all of the fertility medications. We did try one round of IUI. That was not successful. But at that point, again, we had been so many years into the process that we were ready to kind of get going with IVF.
After preparing your body, did it feel scary to do IVF?
I think IVF is scary and intimidating no matter what. But did I feel like I was in a much better position and I felt that my body was in the best place? I remember actually having that conversation with my husband of like, if this doesn't work, I know that we did everything that we could have done. If I'm going to do this, I don't want to waste any of those things and take
physical,
take
mental,
the time.
Emotional. Yes, the financial is a very important one. I think that's one that we talk about obviously quite a bit in society, but the other investments that you're making that are non-financial are enormous.
Went into it knowing that we had done everything that we could do. And so if it was meant to work, it was meant to work. I wouldn't have any regrets about like, oh, well, maybe I should have spent more time focusing on my nutrition, or maybe I should have insert anything here. That's also not to say that I was perfect by any means in terms of following all of the rules, and that is also impossible.
Okay, so we're going through IVF. We've made the appointment. We're starting the meds. Walk me through your experience with that.
It was a shit show. We just tried to make it this huge box shows up at your house, and it is full of very strong, very expensive medications that control an entire system of your body. And there's needles and there's syringes. And then over the phone, this sweet old nurse from the fertility clinic was like, okay, do you see the box that looks like, and I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Yep. It's fine. The fact that
I'd also like to add, you are a health professional. This is like this setting, the terminology. You are very knowledgeable and accustomed to the conventional medicine world. This is not new for you.
I remember turning to Anthony, my husband, turning to him and being like, this is so intimidating for me, and I know this stuff. Like, I can't imagine. But thankfully, there are a lot of resources out there. We ended up finding, I think it was CVS, that has like a really good YouTube video that literally is like step by step, like, okay, now take the cap off of this. Because I will say, although our fertility clinic did have videos online, they were not the most helpful and assume that you know a lot and are familiar. So we tried to be as organized with it as possible. We don't have other kids, so we didn't have to worry about, leaving medications out or things out. So we kind of took over our dining room table, and I would set up like a week at a time until, it literally was, it looked a little like a hospital room in here. We'd set up, okay, on this day, you have to take this one and this much. And I wrote down on each. I felt like if I wasn't that organized with it, it would just be overwhelming, even more overwhelming than it already was. Everything went well with the retrieval. They retrieved 12 eggs, 9 they were able to fertilize, and then we ended up with 3.
How old were you when you went through IVF?
I had just turned 34.
What was your experience with the doctors? Because I know that the embryo situation, because you start out, they're monitoring your follicles and they're like, okay, you have 14 follicles that they're showing, and they're going through the numbers. And as the numbers progress, as you make it to each stage, the numbers tend to go down. But how was your experience throughout that process?
Going all the way back to when we had the original testing years and years ago, the doctor that we had at that time, we did not connect with very well. I had made a point to say, sorry, but even if we have to wait a little bit, we'd prefer to have a different provider. Our doctor was much more for us.
A hugely important factor that so many of us feel like we don't have the option to shop around or to find someone that validates our experience or that we want to work with. It almost feels like we're being kind of like rude or selfish if we get a second opinion. And I'm not sure where that comes from, because ultimately doctors are hired professionals, you're paying them, but there's definitely a stigma around that. And I love that you guys were like, nah, that's not
if we're gonna, and same thing, we had those feelings too of like, I'm on the phone, I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm not trying to like offend anybody, but also having said that, you also spend like this much time with the doctor. So to answer your question about the experience itself, it was highly variable based on what tech we had that day, because in the process when they're watching your follicles and how many are developing and things, you're going in for ultrasounds quite frequently, every other day for a while there. And so that day, it just depended on who was working. Yeah. I have one of my lab techs was a man, but everyone else that worked in the clinic were women. And sometimes we, had the sweetest woman who was like, oh, look at all these follicles, and so excited. And,
like,
then
your ovaries.
Yeah. And oh, your uterine lining is beautiful. I'm like, well, never been complimented on that before, but thank you.
I'll take it.
I'll take it. And then, the next time you'd have someone who was not having their best day, and they'd be like, yep, here, write down these numbers and that's it, and we'll call you. And so it was variable. It was variable.
Mm-hmm. We've got 3 embryos. And did you do a frozen or fresh transfer?
That's something that I wasn't really prepared for. And there was definitely a little bit of disappointment there when you're going through all of those ultrasounds and, oh, you have so many follicles, and, oh, great. Because the number of follicles, I don't remember that, but it was well above 12. So then you come out of the retrieval and they're like, we got 12. Like, that's great. I'm like, okay, that's less. And then, they get the call the next day. We were able to fertilized 9. I'm like, okay, that's less, but still, but okay. Like, I'm not really planning on having 9 children. So like, it's
cool.
That's okay. And then you hear that number 3, while excited, those are the 3 best chances that we've ever had. It still going from 12 to 3 feels like there was some disappointment there.
The numbers are bound to go down, medically speaking. Like, it's damn near impossible to get all of them. But right. As someone who's emotionally invested in it, and you're the one experiencing it, that constant like reduction in chances, I wish there was a better way to present that information.
They do tell you generally, but that's something where, I wish they were a little bit more honest. Like, look, it might drop, pretty significantly, and that's completely normal. We did end up doing a fresh transfer for the first one, 10 days-ish after the retrieval, which is
that is a very quick one.
Very quick turnaround. So we did the fresh transfer. It was successful. So they do the transfer. You go in for blood work, usually 2 weeks later, instead of peeing on a stick at home. We were pregnant, which was obviously great news. We were very excited. That's the first time we've ever had a positive pregnancy test. So I would say that's also different in our story compared to others, is despite trying for so many years, we'd never even had a positive. So obviously we were over the moon, super excited. Then they have you come back 2 days later. So then they measure your beta again 2 days later, because ideally in that first early stages and in the first trimester that's doubling every single day. So we went back and mine had gone up but did not double. And they were like, it's okay. Like, we like to see it double, but sometimes it's just a little slow going. Bring you back 2 days later. Unfortunately, that process continued for about 2 weeks, where my levels kept going up, but not enough. And the more that happened, the higher the likelihood of an ectopic pregnancy or a non-viable pregnancy in some way. They can't tell you that for sure in the beginning because it's so small that even doing an ultrasound, nothing would show up. Even if it was a viable pregnancy at that point, nothing would show up. So we had to wait, continue to test when we were, so it was about 2.5 weeks of that, which is a long, drawn out 2.5 weeks.
The longest 2.5 weeks of your life.
So then unfortunately, when we went in, they did the ultrasound, they did find the pregnancy in my left fallopian tube. So we did in fact have an ectopic pregnancy. The hospital is right down the street from the doctor's office. So they told us we could take a little break, and we came back like an hour and a half later, and I did receive 2 injections to terminate the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. What are the odds of an ectopic pregnancy occurring with IVF? Because I was shocked that it was higher than it was with I don't even want to say like just other methods.
I don't know the exact percentage, but I do know that there is a slightly higher risk because IVF is very unnatural, right? What you're doing is very unnatural, and your body hasn't, when you conceive naturally, like, you know, now the egg is traveling down the fallopian tube, like the body is preparing, versus with IVF, it's all of a sudden, oh, this is here. Now the body's reacting to it. Even though when they do the transfer of the embryo, you know, they try to put it in the optimal place, but it can move. And, you know, that's what our first one did. Not fun at all, right? I would never wish that on anyone. And again, the process, right? It takes time. So it's not like they give you the injection and then you're done and your body starts to heal. It takes time for your body to realize that it's not pregnant anymore and start to transition out of that. So those injections are 2 needles that look like they should be for like a large farm animal, not a human being. And they give you 2 shots in the butt, and then we had to go back then, I want to say like 4 to 5 days later for the second round. And then based on how much they want to see that beta is then dropping, and based on how much you potentially will need more, which we did end up needing. I did end up needing a 3rd round of the injections. It took at least a month. If I want to say closer to like 6 weeks for my beta to get all the way back down. Methotrexate is the medication, and it's also a chemo drug because it can be potentially damaging to a future pregnancy. They want to make sure that it's fully out of your system. So our clinic, there are some variables there depending on what clinic you go to and your doctor. Our doctor in our clinic recommended 3 months to make sure that medication is fully out of your system before trying again.
What were those 3 months like? What did you experience, or what did you do? Like, what'd you do?
Yeah, the beginning was a lot of just, you know, curled up in my bed, and then you slowly, you know, just like anything else, any other grief process, right? You slowly start to come out of it and do a little bit more. Yeah, I also wasn't physically feeling great. Yeah. From that medication, and having just finished all of the IVF process, like that's pretty hard on your body.
For IVF meds to then coming down off of that high hormone load, and then the roller coaster of HCG and the additional drug in your, there
were some hormones. There were some hormones. Yeah, it was a process. I will say that yes, we had to wait 3 months because of the medication, but I physically, emotionally, mentally needed at least 3 months. Get through that, get past that. Feel like my body was back to my body.
If I could advise, like you were saying with the medications, even if it weren't for that, for your body to heal, for your hormones to kind of come back down to baseline, and also mentally and emotionally process it because I know a lot of us, when something like that happens, our knee-jerk reaction is to be like, I want to be pregnant again. I want to be pregnant right now. I want to do this again ASAP. And we push our bodies into maybe something that we're not ready for. And so I mean, the medication is a heavy hitting medication, but I almost like that they mandate that 3 months, because it just gives you a little bit of time to actually acknowledge what happened and clear out the space before taking on that workload again. So we ended up working together again after that for a one-to-one.
Yes. Yeah. So I had reached out for a one-to-one just because I felt like my body was all over the place. Or is there something that I should do differently? Should I be changing my supplements in some way to support, which which we did make some adjustments to those kind of things based on what had happened for the last. Timeline wise, I had started the IVF medication and process the first week of February. The transfer and ectopic pregnancy were end of February through March. You and I met together in like June or July.
I'd like to talk about the feelings you had going into this second IVF transfer, because they were very different than the first time around. And there was a lot of fear. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It was very different. So the first time, again, I live in Rhode Island. We have winter starting in February. It was cold and darker, and I was really kind of like cocooning, more of a meditative process, and really trying to be, calm and with my body and those kind of things. Obviously, after the trauma that we went through, having a positive pregnancy test, and then have that ripped away, my feelings were very different. I was very angry. I was frustrated. I was pissed. I was like, after all of this time finally happens, and now this, like, what else do we have to go through and endure? But because my only experience with the process up until that point had been very kind of like Zen and meditative, I was almost feeling guilty and I remember we talked about this. Like, I was like, no, I'm mad, and now I want to like attack this second round. And you had sent me the $1 million baby picture of her like in the corner, and that's how I felt. Like the second time I felt like, no, I'm going into a boxing ring. Like, I want to attack this. But you were very helpful with that. And like, nope, like, let's go with that energy. Let's use that.
I fully believe that because I'm a former athlete, and there are times when you go into a competition that you're feeling very zenned out and very calm. And then there's other times where you got to shake out that energy, and you need your pump up music, and you've got that kind of active energy. And I don't think that that's a bad thing to go into IVF with. If you need a pump up playlist versus a meditation, there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with going with how your energy is shifting, and it shifts cycle to cycle. What worked this first cycle is not going to be the same thing that you need maybe the second cycle.
Absolutely.
But giving yourself permission to feel that, I think was a huge, huge turning point for you, and just being in where you're at right now, instead of trying to recreate what had previously worked. There's a lot of a lot of softness when we start talking about fertility, and terms like mama bear and things like that, they resonate sometimes, and sometimes they just don't. And there's nothing wrong. So you went in like $1 million, but you were Hillary Swank going in.
I was full Hillary Swank.
With this second transfer. So what was that experience like?
We even had an opportunity to do it a month earlier. And I said, nope, I'm almost there, but I'm not quite there yet. And we chose to hold off for another month.
So you were listening to yourself instead of the timeline.
Yes. And I think so much of this whole process, right, is you feel like you're fighting against the clock, and we need to do it now. And everything is so timed. And, but there's something to be said for taking back that power a little bit and being like, nope, I know myself, I know my body. And like, yeah, I feel it. I'm doing much better, and I'm almost there, but not quite. Like, let's give it another month. We had some things going on.
Because when you enter the IVF cycle, there's a lot that's out of your control. You're not controlling the medications. You're not controlling the timings. You're thinking about everybody else's schedule the entire time, the doctor's schedule and all of that. And just having the power to say like, no, I'm not ready. The person who matters the most in this process. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but it makes me so happy.
There's power in that. And you feel like, so much of this is out of your control, but where there are things that you can control, because no one knows you better than you. So that put us like middle of August. Obviously the process is very different when you're doing a fresh transfer versus a frozen transfer. So I did not just have all of those injections and all of those medications in my body and things like, nope, you started taking one oral medication, one timing, and making sure that your body is not going to naturally ovulate, and then going for the transfer. And again, you're not feeling like that appointment was just went in like you would for like a regular checkup. Like I left feeling
like too easy, not easy, but
exactly.
Like, where's the struggle? Where's the hard part?
Isn't there more? I'm supposed to feel like shit when I walk out of here or something? Like, no. And it was like 15 minutes, we were in and out. I'm like, okay, well, now we'll just wait.
What was the result of that transfer?
They do the same thing, bring you back in 2 weeks for the beta test. And we did have a positive, which was great. But I will say our reaction was very different than the first time. While we were both excited and very happy, it was hard to let yourself be fully happy because of the experience we had just had. So then we will go back 2 days later. And that one I would say was more of the like holding your breath, nervous, like we need this number to double. So we don't have this experience again. And thankfully it had almost tripled at that point. And then they brought us back, I think a week later and those kind of things. And then early ultrasound and confirmed the pregnancy in the correct place this time.
So at what point did you feel like you could finally kind of be like, oh, I am a little bit more excited versus the anxiety piece of it?
I will say that has been a struggle consistently. I think that at each point, I was able to allow myself to be a little bit more excited, but I'd be lying if I said those like intrusive thoughts of years of struggling and just having gone through an ectopic pregnancy were not very much pervasive, and having to make a conscious effort consistently to say like, nope, it's okay. Like things are okay right now. Don't go to that place.
Being in this moment. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the second beta was huge. That was a big weight off our shoulders. And then the first ultrasound was also, again, a big sigh of relief. I did have, of course, because we just have to keep it interesting, I did have some bleeding in my first trimester. So, of course, every time you see that, sends me down a rabbit hole. The plus side of that was that we had many more ultrasounds than the average person. And every time that I was able to see that is a little sigh of relief.
How many weeks are you now?
31 weeks pregnant today. It's been quite the journey, and talking to so many of my friends who have been pregnant who have not had the prior experience that we had, and the different perspectives of things and thoughts. And of course for every woman it's a scary and exciting time. When you deal with infertility for so long or having loss, it changes kind of how the process goes.
So what would you say were the biggest things, if there are any, what were the things would you say that Fertile as Fuck and your following one-to-ones helped you with the most, preparing for this enormous work?
I felt prepared. I felt comfortable with, had I not done Fertile as Fuck, I would not have been able to look at my husband like I did before we started IVF and say, I feel like I've done everything. I was trying to do everything before, right? As every person does.
And
but there's just
intelligence, it's not motivation, it's not access to information, it's not college or any of that. That's not you. I mean, you had it all. You were checking all of the boxes, Kate.
Or so I thought, right? I had overwhelmed myself with information, which I think is also very common.
At least the kind of clients I attract, I never attract women who are not doing enough. I attract women who are doing the most.
God bless my husband. There were some times where I'd say, oh yeah, now we have to do this and we have to do these things. And he'd just be like, okay, sure. Right. And like but the longer it goes, the more and more like outlandish and ridiculous things
you don't start out
that you think of
going 100 million miles an hour. It accumulates over the time that you've been trying.
No. So I definitely think doing Fertile as Fuck before just helped me feel prepared, felt like I had finally received, and don't get me wrong, some of the information that I had that we went through in the program was not necessarily new, but then confirmed to me like, okay, this part that you're doing, this is right, or this does work. Whereas, other things where there's a better way.
So it was sort of like streamlining for you. Instead of having to like second guess yourself all the time, it was just like, all right, this way is validating and also dismissing the things that you were unsure about.
And I think that there's something to be said for the phrase like knowledge is power. It has to be the right knowledge. I did feel empowered going into the process that I had been given thorough, accurate, but also really manageable information, right? Like it wasn't like you have to do all of these things and change this and it's never going to be successful if you don't do this, because the program is so approachable and the changes are just very small and minor here and there, small lifestyle changes and things. It felt very achievable. And so I felt prepared, and I felt like I had done what I could do at that point because of the structure of the program.
Was there anything that at the time you're like, this is awful, this is terrible, but now looking back, you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of funny how that worked out?
Just the whole thing in general, looking back and laughing at, or that, those however many times of going to the lab and getting my blood drawn for weeks. Me and the 2 lab techs, we're buds. It was as if like that was my second home for a while. My car will connect to the Bluetooth on my phone. Every morning, it tells me how many minutes to get to work because it's just assuming that I'm going to work. Well, it had switched to telling me how many minutes to get to the fertility clinic. Yes, because I was going so often, made me really annoyed, and now is kind of amusing. I was like, yes, I know, I have to go back. Thank you for the reminder.
I bet it felt really good to be like, nope, I'm not going there today.
Yes, the first time that I would just like ignore, not going back.
Do you have any advice for women who are maybe where you were at a couple years ago? If you could talk to 2 years ago, Kate, what would you say to her?
It's so hard because when you're in the moment, you feel like you're living in these like 4 to 5 week windows, that your whole life is just being reset for the next 4 to 5 weeks, for the next cycle, for every cycle. And it's really hard. I joke to this day, like, oh, I just wish someone would have told me that it was going to take that long. And then I just could have lived my life and then been like, oh, we're not going to get pregnant until I'm 35, which is later than what I thought, but at least I know it's coming then. Unfortunately, that isn't there. I recognize how easy it is for me to say this now, sitting here 31 weeks pregnant. It's okay to feel anything and everything that you want to feel. Like we were talking about the 2 different approaches to the IVF. If you're angry, if you're sad, if you're however, at any point in this fertility journey, like you can let yourself feel whatever you need to feel. If you need to lay in bed for 4 days and cry because you're upset, do it. If you are ready to like, nope, I'm good, I'm ready to move on, like there's no right or wrong way to do that. And then the other thing I would say is to be patient, not with the process, not with yourself. It's impossible. It's impossible to be patient. Of course, this is something that you want so bad, but to be patient with yourself. It's okay if you need to feel a certain type of way, or don't ever feel guilty, frustrated with yourself for how you're dealing with it, how you're going through it. Everybody deals and processes it very differently. My husband and I deal with things very differently. Also, like it's a very different process for him in terms of like, it's not his body, but it's something that he's, super invested in. So just allowing yourself and your partner, if you have a partner or whatever, to process however you need to.
I think that's huge. And even just what you were sharing about waiting until you were ready to do your next cycle. I want all women to feel like they have that kind of power. You have time. And I know that's the biggest thing we hear with fertility is like, you're running out of time. You have to hurry. You're going to run out of eggs. That's not how this works. You have time to take care of yourself. Just allowing yourself to move forward with something when you feel ready, or to pull back when you don't feel ready for something. It's more than just saying yes or no. It is empowering your decision-making process in this entire thing. And really taking control of probably the only thing we really do have control. We don't have control over when, where, and how exactly this is going to happen. We can only prepare for it, following your own timeline.
So many things in this process that are out of your control, but there are things that you can control, and whatever feels the best for you at that time. Like I will say, I would never tell anybody else what to do, but I will say that at this point, I would never do a fresh transfer again. I think now, knowing what I know, what was going on in my body, the amount, having just done all of the medications, feeling super off in general, like, no, my body wasn't ready for a pregnancy at that point versus the difference in how my body felt when we did the frozen transfer. That's control that I feel like I have taken back, and you can do that. And of course the doctors and, you know, whoever you're working with, they're professionals. They're going to make their recommendation. You don't have to agree necessarily or with their timeline or to do what works for you.
You live in your body. You live in your own body. No one else does. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I have loved
Absolutely.
talking to you, and I'm so excited for your little nugget to
Thank
make it
you.
here,
Thank you.
and so thrilled and honored that you shared your story with us today. And I just want to say thank you.
Of course. Well, thank you for asking. I appreciate everything that you have done. I mean, he probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your help. So I appreciate
We'll end it both crying. How about that?
you.